The letter arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a pizza flyer and my overdue electric bill. No return address, just my name written in careful, deliberate strokes that seemed almost familiar. I might have tossed it with the junk mail if not for the weight of the envelope, too heavy for a simple note. My name is Sloane, and until that moment, I thought I had my life figured out. I was wrong. Standing in my tiny apartment kitchen, I sliced open the envelope with trembling fingers. A stack of documents spilled onto my counter, along with a handwritten note that made my stomach drop. Your mother isn't who she claims to be. She's after your inheritance, and she's using Tessa to get it. Watch your back. I read it 3 times, trying to make sense of the words. My mother, Marla, had waltzed back into our lives 6 months ago after a 12-year absence, full of apologies and promises. Dad welcomed her back with open arms. My 14-year-old half-sister, Tessa, was thrilled to finally have her mom around. And me? I'd been keeping my distance, spending more time with the animals at the zoo where I volunteer than with my newly reunited family. The documents were bank statements showing suspicious transfers from my father's accounts to offshore locations. Dates, amounts, account numbers, all meticulously highlighted. My hands shook as I spread them across the counter. My phone buzzed. Dad's face lit up the screen. "Hey, sweetie," he said when I answered. "Your mother's making her famous lasagna tonight. Coming over." I stared at the papers in front of me. "I don't know, Dad. I have this job interview tomorrow at the zoo." "The zookeeper position? That's perfect for you." His voice softened. "But your mother really wants you here. Tessa too. They miss you." The guilt in his voice was familiar. He'd been trying to bridge the gap between Marla and me since she returned. I closed my eyes, remembering the last family dinner. Marla's perfectly practiced smile, Tessa's hero worship gaze, Dad's desperate attempts to pretend we were one big happy family. "I'll try," I said, knowing I wouldn't. After hanging up, I messaged Jonah, my online friend who worked at another zoo across the country. "Got a weird letter today. Someone's trying to stir up trouble about Mom." His response was quick. "The one who abandoned you? Maybe there's something to it." I started to type a defense, then stopped. Why was I defending her? Because Dad wanted me to? Because it was easier than admitting I still didn't trust her? My laptop chimed with an email notification. Another message, this time from an encrypted address. "Check the trust fund paperwork from 2010. She's already tried this before." The hair on my neck stood up. I slammed the laptop shut, but not before catching a glimpse of my reflection in the dark screen. Wide-eyed, pale, looking exactly like the scared 10-year-old girl who woke up one morning to find her mother gone. The animals at the zoo were easier than people. They didn't pretend to be something they weren't. A snake would strike if it felt threatened. A lion would roar before it attacked. But people? People smiled while they plotted, hugged while they betrayed. My phone buzzed again, Tessa this time. "Mom's asking about the trust fund paperwork Dad gave you last month. Did you sign it?" I stared at the message, then at the mysterious letter, then back at my phone. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. "Not yet," I typed back, my fingers hovering over the send button. "Tell her I'll bring it to dinner tomorrow." But I knew I wouldn't be going to dinner. Instead, I'd be making some calls, starting with Dad's old lawyer. Because if there's one thing working with animals had taught me, it's that when something feels wrong, it usually is. And right now, everything felt wrong. I hadn't planned on going to my father's house that evening, but the trust fund paperwork was burning a hole in my messenger bag. Standing in his driveway, I watched Marla through the kitchen window, coaching Tessa on her homework. They looked so normal, so perfect, it made my skin crawl. My phone buzzed with another message from Jonah. "Did you call the lawyer yet?" Before I could respond, the front door swung open. Tessa stood there, arms crossed, looking more like our father than ever. "Are you just going to stand there all night?" I was admiring Mom's roses. I lied, nodding toward the wilting flower beds I used to tend with Elise, my former stepmother. The ones Marla had promised to revive but hadn't touched. Tessa rolled her eyes. "Whatever. Mom wants the paperwork." I followed her inside, the familiar scent of home now tainted with Marla's expensive perfume. Dad was in his usual spot, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed work documents at the dining room table. Sloan. He brightened immediately. You came, just dropping something off. I pulled out the trust fund papers, watching Marla's reflection in the window. She'd gone still, pretending to focus on Tessa's textbook while clearly straining to hear our conversation. Actually, I said, louder than necessary, I had some questions about these documents. Marla's head snapped up. Oh, what kind of questions? Just trying to understand why we're restructuring the trust now. I kept my voice casual, but my heart was racing, especially the part about transferring management rights. Dad looked confused. What management rights? It's a standard update. Marla cut in smoothly, abandoning her post at the kitchen counter. The lawyer suggested it, remember? To protect the girls' interests. Which lawyer? I asked. Because I called Mitchell's office today, and he hasn't handled our accounts since last year. The room went quiet. Tessa's pencil stopped scratching against her paper. Dad's confusion deepened into concern. I hired new representation, Marla said quickly. Someone more, specialized in family trusts. Without telling Dad, Sloan, Dad warned, but I could see the doubt creeping into his expression. Marla's phone rang, breaking the tension. She glanced at the screen, and something flickered across her face. Fear? She excused herself, hurrying upstairs with the phone clutched to her chest. I don't understand why you're being so difficult, Tessa snapped at me. Mom's trying to help. Like she helped when she left us? The words came out before I could stop them. That's enough, Dad said firmly. But Tessa was already pushing away from the table, tears in her eyes. You're just jealous because she loves me more, Tessa shouted, running upstairs. I stood there, feeling like I was 10 years old again, watching my family fracture. But this time was different. This time I had proof something was wrong. From upstairs, Marla's voice drifted down. I know. I'm handling it. She doesn't suspect anything. Dad was rubbing his temples, a gesture I recognized from countless difficult moments in our past. Sloan, honey, I know this adjustment has been hard. Did you actually read these documents? I interrupted, sliding them across the table. Really read them? He picked them up, squinting through his reading glasses. As his eyes moved down the page, his frown deepened. I should have Mitchell look these over, he muttered. You should. I hesitated, then added, and maybe check your bank statements too. His head snapped up, but before he could respond, Marla reappeared, her composure slightly cracked around the edges. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Perfect, she replied, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Will you be staying for dinner? Can't. Job interview tomorrow, remember? As I left, I heard Marla asking Dad about the papers, her voice honey-sweet and persuasive. But I'd seen the crack in her facade, heard the panic in her phone conversation. Outside, I texted Jonah. You were right. Something's definitely wrong. And I think it's bigger than just the trust fund. His response was immediate. Be careful. People who have something to hide usually have more than one secret. Looking back at the house, I saw Tessa watching me from her window. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something there, doubt, fear, confusion. Then she pulled the curtains closed, shutting me out completely. Elisa's house always smelled like cinnamon and hope. Even now, sitting in her sunny kitchen while my former stepmother made tea, I felt the knots in my shoulders starting to loosen. Her nephew's artwork covered the fridge, bright, messy paintings that reminded me of the ones she used to hang up when I was younger. You look exactly like you did at 10, Elise said, sliding a mug across the counter. Same worried forehead. That obvious, huh? Honey, you wouldn't be here at 7 in the morning if something wasn't wrong. She settled onto the stool beside me. Is it about Marla? I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos I'd taken of the trust fund documents and bank statements. Her expression darkened as she scrolled through them. History repeating itself, she muttered. What do you mean? She set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. Your father never told you why Marla really left, did he? She abandoned us. What else is there to know? There was money missing then too. Nearly $500,000. Elise's hands tightened around her mug. Your father covered it up to protect you girls. He thought if you knew. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Did you know about this when you were married to Dad? I found out near the end. It's partly why we divorced. I couldn't understand how he could let her back into your lives, even just through letters and birthday cards. She reached for my hand. I should have told you sooner, but it wasn't my story to tell. My phone buzzed, another text from Tessa. Mom's crying in her room. Thanks a lot. I don't know what to do, I admitted. If I tell Dad what I suspect, it'll destroy him. If I don't, you'll end up losing everything anyway, Elise finished, including your sister. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a call from Dad. I let it go to voicemail. You know what the worst part is? I said, staring at his smiling contact photo. Part of me wants her to be innocent, for Tessa's sake, for Dad's. Even after everything. That's because you have a good heart, Elise said. But sometimes having a good heart means making hard choices to protect the people you love. A text from Jonah popped up. Found something interesting about Marla's new lawyer. Call me when you can. I need to make a call, I said, standing. But first, those documents you mentioned, from 12 years ago. Do they still exist? Elise's eyes narrowed. Possibly. In your father's home office, there's a false bottom in the bottom right drawer. He thinks I don't know about it. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of cinnamon and safety. Thank you. For everything. Be careful, Sloane. Marla's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. Outside, I called Jonah while walking to my car. His voice was tight with urgency. Her lawyer isn't real, he said without preamble. The firm exists, but the person she claims is representing her doesn't work there. Never has. My hands started shaking. There's more. Elise just told me about money that went missing 12 years ago, right before Mom left. Jesus, Jonah breathed. What are you going to do? I spotted movement in my rearview mirror, a familiar car turning onto the street. I need to get into Dad's office. The proof might be there. Want me to stay on the line? No, but keep your phone close. My voice wavered slightly. Always, he said softly. The car behind me turned when I turned. My heart rate kicked up. I think I'm being followed. What? By who? Can't tell, but I've seen this car before, outside my apartment last night. I made another random turn. The car followed. I need to go. Sloane, wait. I ended the call, hands gripping the steering wheel. In my mirror, I could just make out the driver's face. It was Marla. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have left it alone. Some secrets are better left buried. I took a deep breath, remembering what Elise said about desperate people. Then I turned my car toward my father's house. If Marla wanted to follow me, fine. Let her see exactly what I was capable of. The zoo's interview panel consisted of 3 people, but I could barely focus on any of them. My phone had buzzed twice during the meeting, both texts from Tessa about Dad's missing files. Apparently, Marla had torn apart his office looking for something while I was at Elise's. Your experience with large predators is impressive, the head zookeeper said, drawing my attention back. But I'm curious about how you handle unexpected situations. I thought about Marla following me earlier, about the missing files, about everything spiraling out of control. I've learned that the most dangerous moments are when you think you have everything figured out. They seemed to like that answer. An hour later, I had the job. Standing in the parking lot afterward, I checked my messages. 5 missed calls from Dad, 3 from Tessa, and 1 from an unknown number. But it was Jonah's text that made my stomach drop. Found something about Marla. It's worse than we thought. Call ASAP. Before I could dial, another call came through. Dad. Where are you? His voice was strange, tight. We need to talk. I just finished my interview. What's wrong? Come to the house. Please. He hung up before I could respond. The drive home felt endless. When I pulled up, I noticed Marla's car was gone, but there was a police cruiser in the driveway. My hands went cold. Inside, I found Dad sitting at the kitchen table with 2 officers. Tessa was curled up on the couch, her face tear-stained. The trust fund papers were spread across the table. "Miss Harrington," one officer said, standing, "we need to ask you some questions about your mother." "What happened?" "Someone accessed your father's accounts this morning," the officer said. Nearly $2 million was transferred offshore. The bank flagged it as suspicious activity. "Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. They think you might have helped her." The room tilted sideways. "What?" "The transfers were authorized using your social security number," the second officer explained. "And there's evidence of communication between you and your mother planning this for months." "That's impossible." I pulled out my phone, showing them the threatening texts. "She's been following me, sending me warnings." "From your own number," the officer cut in. "We checked. The texts you're claiming came from her were sent from a second phone registered in your name." Tessa made a small, hurt sound from the couch. "I found Mom crying this morning. She showed me the emails you sent her, threatening to destroy our family if she didn't leave again." "Emails I never wrote," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "Dad, you know I wouldn't." "Do I?" He finally looked at me, and the doubt in his eyes felt like a physical blow. "You've been acting strange ever since she came back, asking about the trust, looking through my files." My phone buzzed, Jonah, again. I answered on speaker, desperate for someone to believe me. "Sloan, listen," he said urgently. "Marla's done this before. 3 other families, different names. She." The call cut off abruptly. When I tried to redial, the number was unavailable. "Officers," Dad said quietly, "I'd like to press charges." The world stopped. "Dad, please." "I'm sorry, Sloan." He looked ancient, suddenly broken. "But the evidence, your signature on the transfers, the emails, the phone records." "Miss Harrington," the officer said, reaching for his handcuffs, "please place your hands behind your back." As they led me out, I caught a glimpse of movement in the upstairs window. Marla, watching with what looked like genuine sadness on her face. But underneath it, something else flickered in her eyes. Something that looked almost like triumph. My phone lit up one last time before they took it. "Some daughters never learn when to let go. Say goodbye to everything you love." The message was from my own number. In the back of the police car, I thought about what Elise had said about desperate people being dangerous. She was right. But she'd forgotten something important. Sometimes the most dangerous person isn't the desperate one. It's the one who has nothing left to lose. And thanks to Marla, that's exactly what I'd become. 3 days in county lockup gave me plenty of time to think. The fluorescent lights never went off completely, casting everything in a sickly glow that made sleep impossible. Not that I could sleep anyway. Not with Marla's perfectly orchestrated plan playing on repeat in my head. Elise posted my bail. When she picked me up, her face was drawn with worry. "Jonah's been trying to reach you," she said as we drove. "He found something about Marla's past, records under different names, similar schemes. The police are looking into it." "Too late," I muttered, staring out the window. "She's probably long gone with the money by now." "Actually," Elise hesitated. "She's still at your father's house, acting the concerned mother, telling everyone how worried she is about your mental state." My laugh sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Of course she is." My phone had been confiscated as evidence, but Elise handed me her tablet. "Jonah sent these files. You need to see them." The documents showed a pattern spanning 15 years, different names, different cities, but always the same story. A broken family, a prodigal mother's return, missing money, and a daughter left holding the blame. In 3 cases, the daughters were still in prison. "She's not after the money," I realized, my stomach turning. "She's after revenge," Elise finished. "But against who?" Before I could answer, headlights swept across us. A car pulled alongside at the red light, Tessa in the passenger seat, Marla driving. Our eyes met through the windows. Tessa's face crumpled. She mouthed something that looked like, "I'm sorry," before Marla accelerated through the yellow light, leaving us behind. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your sister's starting to ask questions. Shame if she ended up like the others." "Take me to Dad's house," I said, my voice steady despite the fear churning in my gut. Sloan, you can't. The restraining order. She's going to hurt Tessa. I showed her the text. I don't care about the consequences anymore. Elise studied me for a long moment, then made a U-turn. There's something else you should know. Your father's been trying to reach you through me. He found something in his office after the police left. Old letters between Marla and his father, from before you were born. My grandfather had died before I was born, leaving everything to Dad. The inheritance that had made our family wealthy. What did they say? I don't know the details, but it changed something for him. He's been asking questions, looking into the past. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. And now Marla's threatening Tessa. Another text came through. Tick-tock. Some secrets stay buried. Others take everyone down with them. We pulled up to my father's house. Lights blazed from every window, silhouettes moving inside. My heart hammered against my ribs as we approached the door. Dad opened it before we could knock. He looked like he'd aged years in 3 days. You shouldn't be here, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Where's Tessa? Upstairs with your mother. Sloan, I found. A scream cut through the house, Tessa's voice, high with panic. I pushed past Dad, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Behind me, I heard him calling the police. I found them in Dad's office. Marla had Tessa cornered by the window, an old leather-bound journal in her hands. My sister's face was streaked with tears. Tell her, Tessa pleaded. Tell her the truth about Grandpa. Marla's composed mask cracked slightly. I told you to stay quiet. The truth about what? I demanded. About why she really came back, Tessa said. About what Grandpa did to her before you were born. About why she... Enough. Marla's voice shook with something beyond anger, real fear. She moved toward Tessa, journal raised like a weapon. I stepped between them, finally understanding. This wasn't about money or revenge against me. This was about something deeper, darker, a generational secret that had poisoned everything it touched. And now I had to choose. Expose the truth and risk destroying what was left of our family, or let Marla's cycle of revenge continue. Behind me, Tessa whispered. I found the other letters, Mom. I know everything. The journal fell from Marla's hands, pages scattering across the floor like broken promises. The scattered pages from Marla's journal painted a horrifying picture. Each entry revealed another layer of my grandfather's abuse, his manipulation, the way he'd used his money and power to silence everyone around him, including my mother. I was 17, Marla whispered, her composure finally cracking. Your father never knew. His father threatened to destroy everything if I told anyone. Dad stood in the doorway, his face ashen. The letters I found were my attempts to warn you, Marla said. But he intercepted them all. When I found out I was pregnant with Sloan, I thought... She broke off, hands shaking. I thought I could protect her. But he had other plans. The trust fund, I realized. The one he set up for me before he died. It wasn't a gift. It was insurance. Marla's laugh was bitter. As long as that money existed, tied to his name, his secrets stayed buried. I couldn't let you inherit that poison. Tessa moved closer to me, gripping my hand. That's why you came back.
To steal the money.
To destroy it, Marla corrected. Along with everything else he built on other people's pain. But I needed someone to blame when it all fell apart. The weight of understanding crashed over me. You set me up to take the fall. Just like those other daughters in different cities. They were like you, inheritors of blood money, living off the profits of monsters. Her voice hardened. I gave them a choice. Help me destroy it all or go down with it. And when they refused, they chose their inheritance over justice. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Dad stepped into the room, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The police are coming, he said quietly. Marla, what you've done to our daughter. What I've done. She whirled on him. What your father did destroyed everything. And you never saw it, never questioned where all that money really came from. What he was really doing with his business trips and his investments in young companies run by desperate young women. The journal pages at our feet suddenly felt radioactive. Each one documented not just personal abuse, but a pattern of exploitation spanning decades. My inheritance wasn't just tainted, it was blood money. I'll tell them everything, I said as the sirens got closer. About Grandpa, about the money, about all of it. They won't believe you, Marla said softly. They never do. That's why I had to do it this way. Make you look unstable, desperate for attention. Just like the others. Tessa pulled away from me, horror dawning on her face. The other daughters, they're still in prison because no one believed them either. The front door burst open downstairs. Heavy footsteps approached. Last chance, Sloane, Marla said, her voice almost gentle. Help me finish this, or spend the rest of your life paying for his crimes. Dad moved between us. Enough, Marla. It's over. It's been over for a long time, she replied, pulling something from her pocket, a USB drive. Everything's already done. The money's gone, distributed to his victims. All that's left is deciding who takes the blame. The police reached the top of the stairs. In that moment, looking at my father's devastation, Tessa's tears, and Marla's cold determination, I made my choice. I'll confess, I said as the officers appeared in the doorway. To all of it. Sloane, no. Dad started, but I cut him off. Better me than Tessa growing up without a mother. I met Marla's eyes. That's what this was really about, wasn't it? Making sure history didn't repeat itself. For the first time, I saw real emotion crack through her facade, pain, guilt, and something that might have been gratitude. As the officers moved to handcuff me, I heard Tessa's broken whisper. But who's going to protect you? I didn't have an answer. Some sacrifices don't come with protection plans. They just come with the hope that somehow, the truth will eventually surface, even if you're not around to see it. The interrogation room felt smaller with each passing hour. Detective Morris had been questioning me for 3 hours straight, but I kept my story consistent. I'd stolen the money. I'd framed my mother. I'd done it all, until Jonah walked in. You can't be here, I said, my carefully constructed facade cracking at the sight of him. Actually, he can, Detective Morris said. Mr. Reed has provided us with some very interesting evidence. Jonah set a laptop on the table, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity I'd never seen before. I'm sorry, Sloane, but I can't let you do this. The screen showed a video feed, Marla in another interrogation room, breaking down as she read something. With a start, I recognized the handwriting from the anonymous letters. Elise, I whispered. Your former stepmother kept everything, Jonah said. Every letter your grandfather wrote to Marla. Every threat, every transaction. She's been gathering evidence for years, waiting for the right moment. The door opened again. Dad walked in, followed by Elise herself. The other daughters, Elise said, placing a thick folder on the table. I found them all. They're being released as we speak, their cases reopened based on new evidence. My hands started shaking. But Marla is telling the truth now, Dad cut in. His voice was raw. All of it. About my father, about what he did, about why she really came back. Detective Morris slid another document across the table. Your mother just signed a full confession. Not about the money, about everything else, including how she manipulated you into taking the blame. I chose to take it, I insisted. Did you? Jonah opened another video file. Or did she spend months setting you up, knowing you'd sacrifice yourself to protect Tessa? The video showed Marla on various dates, making calls, sending texts from a phone registered in my name, creating the trail of evidence that would implicate me. She needed someone to blame, Elise explained gently. Someone the police would believe could have stolen the money. But she also needed someone strong enough to survive taking the fall. Where is she now? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Making things right, Dad said, starting with returning the money to the victims' families. A knock at the door. Tessa burst in, ignoring the detective's protests. I heard Mom's confession, she said, tears streaming down her face. About everything. About what she did to you. What Grandpa did to her. Why didn't you tell me? Because you deserve to have a mother who wasn't broken, I said softly. I deserve the truth, Tessa countered. We all did. Detective Morris cleared his throat. Miss Harrington, in light of the new evidence, we're dropping all charges against you. However, we'll need your testimony about your grandfather's activities. And Marla will face consequences for her actions, he said. But her cooperation and the circumstances, the DA is willing to be lenient. I looked at my family, Dad's guilt-ridden face, Tessa's tear-stained cheeks, Elise's quiet strength, Jonah's unwavering support. And somewhere in another room, Marla, finally telling the truth after decades of silence. I want to see her, I said. They led me to her room. She looked up as I entered, her mask completely gone. I tried to protect you, she whispered, in the worst possible way. By making me into you? Someone willing to sacrifice everything for revenge. No, she said, surprising me. By making you strong enough to do what I never could. Tell the truth, no matter the cost. I sat across from her, seeing her clearly for the first time, not as the mother who abandoned me, or the manipulator who tried to destroy me, but as someone who'd been broken long before I was born. Then let's tell it together, I said. All of it. No more secrets, no more revenge. She reached across the table, hesitantly taking my hand. Behind the two-way mirror, I knew our family was watching, waiting to see if healing was possible after so much damage. I didn't know if it was, but I knew we had to try. For all the daughters who came before, and all the ones who would come after. 6 months later, I stood at the zoo's lion enclosure, watching the morning feeding. My new uniform still felt stiff, but the name tag reading, assistant keeper, made it worth it. Behind me, familiar footsteps approached. They're like family, aren't they? Tessa said, joining me at the railing. All protecting each other, even when they fight. I smiled at my sister's insight. At 14, she was starting to see the world with clearer eyes than most adults I knew. Mom's hearing is next week, she continued, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. She wants us both there. Marla had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify about our grandfather's crimes in exchange for a reduced sentence. The money she'd stolen had been returned to its rightful owners, the families of all the women he'd hurt over the years. Will you come? Tessa asked. I watched the lioness nudge her cubs toward their meal, protective, but allowing them to find their own way. Yes. My phone buzzed, a message from Jonah with a photo of his new rescue tiger. He'd been offered a position at our zoo, but we both agreed that long distance worked better for now. Some things needed time to grow naturally. Dad's selling the house, Tessa said suddenly. Says he doesn't want to live with Grandpa's ghost anymore. I nodded. Dad had changed the most through all this, facing his own blindness to his father's crimes. He'd donated most of his inheritance to organizations supporting abuse survivors, keeping only enough to ensure Tessa's education. Elise helped him find a smaller place, I said, close to both of us. And those letters she sent you? The ones that started everything. I touched my pocket, where I kept the last anonymous letter Elise had written, not a warning this time, but a reminder that sometimes the hardest truths come from those who love us most. She saw what was coming, I said. She knew I'd need proof of everything eventually. That's why she kept all those documents about Grandpa. But she let you figure it out yourself, Tessa observed, even when it hurt. Sometimes that's what love looks like. A commotion drew our attention back to the lions. The smallest cub had wandered too close to the water, and the entire pride moved as one to guide it back to safety. No blame, no punishment, just protection and guidance. I visited Mom yesterday, I admitted. She's different now. More like I imagined she was before everything happened. Before Grandpa? Before she learned to use pain as a weapon. Tessa leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. Do you think we'll ever be a normal family? Normal's overrated, I said, making her laugh. But maybe we can be something better, honest. My work radio crackled, calling me to the elephant enclosure. As I turned to leave, Tessa caught my arm. The inheritance, she said. The part that was supposed to be yours. Do you regret giving it up? I thought about the blood money that had poisoned 3 generations of our family. About Marla's twisted path to justice. about my own brush with becoming someone I wasn't meant to be. Some legacies aren't worth keeping, I said finally. We get to choose which ones we carry forward. She nodded, understanding more than a 14-year-old should have to. But that was our family now, carrying hard truths together instead of suffering alone with comfortable lies. As I walked to the elephant enclosure, I passed the zoo's newest exhibition, a butterfly sanctuary. Through the glass, I watched the delicate creatures emerge from their chrysalises, transformed but still bearing marks of their past lives in their wing patterns. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Marla. I'm ready to tell the whole truth. Not for redemption. For healing. I looked back at Tessa, still watching the lions. At the butterflies breaking free. At my reflection in the glass, finally recognizing the person staring back at me. Some stories don't end with perfect justice or complete forgiveness. They end with small steps towards something better, with the understanding that healing isn't a destination but a daily choice. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's